Everybody else, any questions for me before we get started and get into the
Come on, buddy.
No, we're good. Okay, so things I want to cover today. We're going to go in depth into some pretty difficult areas for new officials. We're going to be looking at rotation and alignment. And ball handling and possibly back row attack, but I don't think we're going to have enough time to get through all of that. But we're going to be looking at rotation and ball handling are two areas of officiating that really kind of take a little time to become proficient at. So don't expect that you in your first and second year, those areas are things you're going to be identifying quickly. Okay, but we want to talk about it. Share a lot of things that as veteran officials, what we do to help ourselves in those situations, and give you some things to look at and think about. So, yeah. Okay. All right, this is a presentation on the art of officiating, they call it. So, okay. So it talks a lot about philosophy in here, okay? Volleyball definition of penetration fault, interferes with play, vague, ball handling, athletic plays, and spectacular elements of the game. As with basketball, football, and other sports, volleyball referees can learn the art of officiating. What they're talking about here, wait, I'm on the wrong slide, sorry. Hold on. Sorry, there we go. Okay. There's basically going to be, it's going to talk about the stages of officiating, what they define as the art of officiating, learning how the art of officiating, and finally becoming becoming an artist, but they mean becoming a better official, art or science. So there are generally 3 stages of officiating. Stage 1 is where a lot of you guys are starting, which is no idea what just happened on the court. And you know, you're in this steep learning curve. So it's a time, definitely we understand that your first, second, and even third year are a really time that you're going to be learning a lot and making that ascent. Okay, so your first stage, you're really going to spend a lot of moments wondering what just happened. You're learning, okay, trying to put together everything we're telling you, everything your mentors have been telling you, what you've read, what you've tested on, and you're kind of, all of this is going through your head, and you're trying to figure out, you know, how do I put this all into action? Okay, along with, now I also have to use my judgment and officiate the game, along with all this other stuff that's kind of swirling in your head. Okay. Every time you work, you are going to gain confidence. You're going to get better. My one suggestion to you, to all of you, is that work on small things at a time. Don't try and put a whole bunch of issues into play on your next match. If you were having issues with some major things, just focus on that. Okay. Focus on, you know, focus on your net. Focus, are you seeing the play all the way through? Things like that. Okay, so take small bits and try and make that the focal of your next game. Try not to improve everything at once. Okay? After that, the next stage, you sort of start to see everything and you start to call everything. This is more of a black and white process, they say, is that you're starting to understand the rules better. You are seeing the violations. And so as soon as you see them, you're calling them, okay? It's very technical. It's what they call by the book, okay? And there are times that we want to do that and lots of times we don't want to do that, okay? But doesn't mean you were wrong in the call. It just means that it may not have been the best time to make that call. Okay. Once you start to gain confidence, you sort of enter this second stage. This can come your second, third, late in your second year into your third year. For those that have possibly a lot of playing and or coaching experience, it may happen sooner. Those things certainly do help, especially the coaching part, certainly can help you in the volleyball, in the officiating part, and knowing, because you know things like, oh, I'm in a little bit quicker, and those sorts of things. So there are certain things that will help you with. But remember also, you got to call it from an official's perspective too, not a coach's perspective. Okay. Stage 3 is when you're seeing everything, but now you're deciding to make that call or not. Is that the right time? Should that be a call that I should possibly ignore? Am I using preventative officiating? Am I using my knowledge in making common sense in making these decisions? Okay, and starting to know the spirit of the rules as well as the intent. Okay. Stage 3 is probably when you begin to realize there is an art to officiating, a combination of experience, common sense, rules, knowledge, and understanding. Communication is super important here. Integrity, decisiveness, okay? This sort of is going to help you move on in your officiating career. Along with, as we get into this, some of these things, there are some milestones that when you start to see them, those are sort of milestones and steps you're going to make in moving from one stage to the other. And those are also things that are going to help you move up the ladder in terms of moving from a C5 to a C4 to a C3 and on to a C2 and a C1. Okay. Here's the in basketball, there's a definition of a foul, which is illegal contact with an opponent. Very vague, okay? The truth of this is fouls at the top of the key are called differently than fouls under the basket, okay? So, and you're not gonna call the same thing, you're not gonna call the same thing as the player is coming up the court as you are when he's driving to the hoop, okay? In football, there's virtually holding on every play, which is true. I've officiated football, and you have to call the ones that are going to affect the play and ignore the ones that don't. Okay? And that can sort of be transposed over to volleyball, is that you're going to call things that will affect play and you let other things go. Okay? There's a philosophy, you must look at the philosophies of the sport. It's a little vague. Okay. Here we are. Definition of a penetration fault interferes with play. Okay, so that's when a player comes over the net and interferes with play on the other side. Ball handling can also have athletic plays and spectacular elements of the game. And as with the other two sports, volleyball referees can learn the art of this and when is the right time to call these, when is not. Okay. Be a technical referee first. You can separate the rules carefully with the understanding between spirit and intent. Practice. Okay, basically it's saying the more you see, the better you're going to become. And that includes officiating on the court and watching from the stands, doing lines, calling lines. The more contacts you can see, the better you're going to become as an official. Okay? And that's at all levels. You'll see a huge difference in officiating at a Division I level versus a varsity and junior varsity level. And you'll see it also, I should say, at all the levels within freshman through varsity. You're going to see different levels of how we call the game. Okay. Know your role of the official in sporting events. We don't want to become the focal point of the game. I always say, if nobody notices us, we've called a good game. When nobody really has anything to say about anything we did, that means we called the game. We called a pretty good game. Okay. And let the excitement of the match sort of play itself out. Recognize that there's lots of emotional aspects of all games, okay, volleyball included. Set some goals for yourself, try to achieve them. Be a student of the game, okay, regardless of where you came from or number of years, So I know some of us we have some long coaches people who have been coaching for a long, long time. But still officiating is different than coaching. So you still have to be a student of the game for officiating. All right. Stay ahead of the curve, meaning see where the trends are going in the game. Okay. And there's been a lot of changes over the last 10 years in terms of the game. Have knowledge of the volleyball world, not just your little section, not just our little piece of high school volleyball here. Okay. And that's the end of that. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, this is about communication. All right, I skipped over a lot of the first 7 slides are very philosophical. They just put a lot of quotes in and things, and I felt that this was probably the best place to start here. So under the basic principles. All right. As officials, we must recognize that we and our partners will make mistakes during the game, and we have to get past it and get ready for the next point. We all make mistakes in terms of our calls. We'll see things, and basically, if you obsess over those calls, it's going to affect your judgment in the upcoming calls. So you just have to put it aside, deal with it later, talk it over with your partner after the game. Call your mentor, call me, and tell us what happened, and we'll help you through it or understand it, okay? But you want to sort of put it away when it happens and move on and be ready to officiate the next point, okay? You must stay aware of your point of view and what actions you clearly saw. So make sure you see what you're sure what you're seeing. Don't make things up and think you saw something you didn't, okay? Try to understand what your partner saw. So if you're the R2 and I'm the R1 and I make a call or don't make a call, try and sort of flip it around and say, well, from you, it didn't look that way from my angle. What could I have seen from the opposite angle? Okay. You stay ahead. You must figure out what did the coach see and what information does the coach need from you. So the coach is going to see something. Obviously, if he doesn't like it, he's seeing a different point of view than either you or your partner is seeing. So a lot of that can occur at the net play where the coach is 10 feet at the closest. He's 10 feet back from the net where you're right on the net. So there's going to be a slightly different look. And this can go the other way. So you have a better look being right on the net, but this can work the other way as well. Something like a touch off a block, okay, sometimes we may not be in the best position to see that, or we may not have seen it because of our angle, whereas to the coach, that deflection was pretty obvious. So we got to think about that. Did the coach see something from his perspective? Not that we're going to necessarily change our call because of it, but we have to understand that. Also, in that same situation, we're looking to our lines people, our corners, for help on that, because that's part of the thing, is that they'll get a different perspective coming from the corners than we will coming from straight on. Okay. Okay, so when you're talking, who is your audience? Are you talking to the players? Are you talking to the coaches? Are you talking to the spectators? Are you talking to your partner? Okay. Just remember, somebody's always watching. On every level of the game and activities, okay, the game and the activities are taken very seriously. So no matter what, whether we're doing a freshman game, whether we're doing a varsity game, it's serious to those players and those players' family. So let's be respectful of that and not brush something off because it's at a lower level, okay? So that's basically the same thing. Just take it seriously no matter what level you're doing, okay? Be careful of your tone of voice. Try and remain calm no matter what your situation is. Don't get angry. Just do your job. Answer questions. Be pleasant. Be approachable. Okay, at the appropriate times. okay, where obviously coaches have certain, what's the word I'm looking for? Certain rules they need to do in approaching you and asking certain things, okay? Keep control of your game. Don't let the players get out of control. You want to control the situation. So that means maintaining a professional by you, but also maintaining, keeping the players in line in terms of vulgarity, physicalness, those sorts of things. Okay. Make sure you're paying attention, because that'll get you in a world of trouble. Is if you're not paying attention, now sometimes you don't have anything to rely upon. If you miss something that everybody else saw, that's not going to make you look so good. Okay. Again, don't be angry or defensive. We all get a little nervous at times, and nerves are good actually at times. You know, when you're on a big game, you should be a little nervous, because it means you want to do a good job and you care about what you're doing. Okay. But don't let it overwhelm you. Okay. Keep yourself under control, and, you know, and you'll start to call, as soon as you get the jitters out, you'll start to call your game. Okay. Organization is the way in which you choose to present your structure, communication. All of us have our own organizational methods. You're kind of going to have to decide what sort of works for you in that. Don't overtalk. My advice to you guys is, don't try and overtalk things. When I was in basketball, when I was doing basketball, one of the best things somebody said to me is, never call anything you can't explain. Okay. So if you think there was a foul but aren't sure what you saw, let it go. Don't call it. And then when somebody questions you on it and you cannot defend that call by saying, this is the reason, or this is what I saw, then that's probably telling you you need to pass on that call. Okay. And pick the appropriate words in the appropriate situation, how to explain it. Succinct, be succinct. That's another good thing, is that you don't want to take a long time with long explanations. Okay. Be quick and to the point and get on to the game. One thing I do like about basketball was that when we made a call, we got back into the action so quickly that the coaches really didn't have a lot of time to keep harping on us about that same call, because they had to get back to doing their job of coaching their players, because basketball moves so fast. So we kind of want to put that same philosophy into effect with volleyball, is that we want to get back to the game and make the coaches focus now on their players and doing their job, rather than focus on us and a particular call that we made. Again, doesn't mean ignore them, means if they have a viable situation, let's listen, okay? But let's do it in a succinct manner, okay? And just basically just what I said there is, determine what you need to do to get the game moving again, okay? All right, any questions there? Okay. Mentors, feel free to jump in too if you want to add anything to any of this. So. All right, so we are going. All right, ball handling. All right, so last week with the C3s through C1s, we focused a lot on ball handling, and we went through some videos and we went through this presentation. I just kind of felt that it was better at that time to talk about ball handling, that we stay in our own group when we talk about it. So we're going to go through the presentation, and then we're going to put up some videos on what we saw. You might have caught the tail end of some of those videos last week when you guys came back into the session. We were just finishing up. So we're going to go over those videos and talk about those. Ball handling is, again, it's one of those hurdles that you're going to have in officiating. When you can start to make better and more efficient ball handling calls, okay, that's showing that you're progressing in your officiating skill, okay? 4 ways to earn points in volleyball. Okay, there's the criteria for what ball handling is, how to judge it, consistency, judgment, technique, keeping up with the action, situations, and spirits of the rules. That's sort of what we're handling in this presentation here. So here are your 4 ways to earn a point. There's a straight ace, hits the ground inside the opponent's court. Okay, you have a kill, which is an attack by the opponent that ends in the ball going down on their side of the court. A stuff block, which is a block that puts the ball down on the ground, stays on the opponent's court, or an error by the opponent. Okay. All right. So on a team's first ball contact, in any attack, the ball cannot come to rest or be held. Okay. On a second or a third contact, the ball cannot be double contacted, come to rest, or be held. The difference there is on the first ball contact, we can have double contact or multiple contacts on the ball. We'll be talking a lot more about that, but be aware, you do not want to give this signal, okay, as a double on a first ball contact, because there is, with one exception, you do not use this signal for a first ball because you're saying you had a double contact, but a double contact is legal on a first ball, okay? The only time we would do it is if they make 2 separate attempts to play the ball. So if they play it with one hand and then play it with separately, you've determined that attempt has ended, and then they play it again with another hand, that would be double contact. That we do call, because it's 2 separate attempts to play the ball, okay? Okay, and then when the setter on the second contact or third contact, now it has to be clean. You cannot have a double contact on the second or third attempt, okay? And it doesn't matter what the player or the ball does before the contact is made or after the contact is completed. Remember that, because it becomes important. Okay, we'll talk about it more. Illegal contact is a touch of the ball by any player, part of the player's body, which does not allow the ball to visibly come to rest or involve prolonged contact with the player's body. So that means I can kick it, okay? As long as it does not involve prolonged contact, that will be a legal contact. When they say prolonged, it could mean held, thrown, or it could mean rolling. If a ball rolls along a player's body, okay, that can be considered prolonged contact, because it stayed in contact with his body more than instantaneously. Okay. So, and volleyball has evolved over the years from a technical sport to a rebound sport. This allows athletes to make great athletic plays, which leads to longer rallies, making volleyball more exciting and play to watch. That's sort of where where they're allowing double contacts on that first contact. They're allowing multiple contacts because they want to keep play alive. They didn't want the play to be ended with a poor pass, or a pass that was to rebound off 2 different parts of their body on that first contact. We want to give them opportunities to keep that ball alive. Okay. Okay, just because the player's hand is under the ball at the time of contact does not make the contact legal. This, I don't know if this one's wrong. We're going to see this same video. I have it on a different format at the end that we're going to go back. I'm going to see if this plays. I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. Okay, so we'll go back to and look at that in video format after this presentation. What is legal and allowed for ball handling is left to the referee's discretion, okay? So all ball handling is pretty much a judgment call. There's really nothing a coach can argue with. I mean, they can certainly argue, but they don't have a foot to stand on, I guess, or leg to stand on when they want to argue a judgment call like that. That is your call, okay? Some referees call it tight, by the book. Other referees call it loose and let more play. And again, some of this is going to be determined by the level that you are officiating, okay? Most of us end up calling it somewhere in between those two, okay? We don't call it super tight, but we don't want to call it super loose. Neither one is wrong, but the most important thing here is consistency. Whatever you call early, try and keep that same level, okay? You're going to It's going to be much more of a problem if you're calling, if you go between tight and loose. Okay, if you're calling some things tight and then you stop and then you go back and forth, that's going to get you into more problems than it is to let things go and call things more loosely. This is another video. Sorry, the video, like I said, we'll look at this, whether we're going to talk about whether these calls are correct or not. We'll do that after this. Okay. Okay, in any given match, the teams and players will adapt to whether it's called tight or loose, so long as it's consistent. So that's what I was just talking about. And the players and coaches, they will be fine with it as long as you keep it the same. If they know it's a loose, you're calling it loose, they're going to be okay with that as long as you continue to call it that way the whole way, or don't call it, or call it for, or as long as you're not calling it one way on one team and one way on the other. Even if one team is much more skilled than the other. If you're letting the less skilled team, okay, you're letting them go on their sets, okay, then when the more skilled team, when that setter maybe makes a mistake, if it's at the same level as the opposite team, you're not going to call it. You're going to let that go too. And does that make sense to everybody? Okay, there. All right. Just what I said, trouble starts when similar actions are not called the same way, okay? Observe your teams during warm-ups, okay? So especially if you're the R1, you wanna be watching what the setter does during their warm-up time, okay? It's a time that you're gonna gain valuable information. You're gonna see how they set the ball, if they have any peculiarities about the way in which they set the ball. Okay, and that's a good time to maybe discuss with your partner. Hey, look at this for me. How would you call that? Okay, or would you call that? And that's a really great time to learn things, is during that warm-up period by watching the players, okay, and what they're doing. It's a good time to ask questions of your other official, especially when you're just starting here. Okay. Whatever standard, just like we talked about, whatever standard you start with, loose or tight, just continue it for the entire match. Okay. Any questions there? All right. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the videos. Okay. All right. Okay, so on this first video, this first play, what we're going to be looking at is we're looking at the contact as it crosses the net onto the blue team side. Okay, we're going to be looking at contact that's close to the net, sort of there in the middle, sort of by the jump circle, by the basketball jump circle. Okay, right there, that was the contact. They're going to slow it down. We'll see this more. Okay, there. And that's the one. Okay, now they're going to zoom in on it. Okay. So here's a time for a little discussion. What are we looking for there? What did some of you see? Feel free to unmute.
Sorry, you cut out there for me. I couldn't hear what you said, the last part.
Okay, I said, what did you see in that play that I was just talking about? That play right at the net. What are we looking at in order to make a determination whether that was a legal contact or an illegal contact?
We're looking to make sure they didn't catch and throw the ball.
Okay, and
possible double.
Okay, would we have a double? Could we have a double there? It was first contact off the block, I believe, is what happened on that one. So we have a block.
Okay, so you would have a catch and throw.
Right. So we have a block, and off the block, that same player can play the ball again, and it's still going to be considered first contact. So off that block, if it hits them in two different places, we're okay. The only one I talked about earlier is if they played it with one hand and then played it with another, and there was a separation there, then you could have a double, but that's not the situation here. Yeah. What we're kind of looking for is what was happening with her hand in that situation.
I think there was a little bit of holding, so I would call that prolonged.
Okay.
Prolonged holding of the ball. So.
Okay. So I will tell you.
Watch the net.
So was that you, Marianne?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to make sure you're watching the net to make sure she doesn't hit the net.
Right. Okay. But we are, and then
You're also,
go ahead.
you're also looking for an open hand. Was it a closed fist or an open hand?
Correct,
And
Jim.
it came off her heel of her hand, not that she really got on her fingertips, but more off her heel, so it was illegal contact.
Correct. Okay.
And
So
that
what Jim's saying, if you can see my video here, is if the hand is open, that should be something you're thinking about. Did that ball come, and was it in the hand, and was it kind of thrown? Did it come to rest? Okay. But if the hand is like this and the ball came off the heel of the hand, okay, that's going to be, we're going to let that go, and that's going to be illegal contact because you have one contact, the ball was out. Okay. If they have a fist, okay, did she hit it with a fist this way or that way? You're not going to have a throw or a held ball in that situation. So you're watching you're watching the hand and what position her hand is in. Okay. I can tell you this looks worse when they slow it down. You can kind of see it better. It looks a lot worse at full speed than it does in the slow-mo. In the slow-mo speed, you can see that she's hitting it with her fist. In the full speed, it might be our angle a little bit too. Remember, we're not looking from the R1 side. We're looking from the R2 side on this particular play. So I'm going to run it back. Try and look at their hand. Look at her hand a little bit more. Okay, there it is in fast action. Here it is slowed down. There, the block. She comes down, hits it with one hand. Okay, now you get a closer view. Look at that. Looks to me like a fist there, okay. So to me, that looked like she got it with a fist or even the backside of her hand when she tried to play it. So I think the consensus there is we would let that play go. Okay. Any questions on that? Anybody see anything different? I'll take experienced officials too if they want to say anything. So, all right.
No, it's good.
Okay. All right, let's look at the next play. Okay, so you got here, you got a touch, you got down. Okay, this far side, you're looking at the block. She touches the ball. Okay. Sort of the same thing as the previous play. We have a block, we have them coming down, and I see a closed fist. I don't see an open palm there or anything that would have caused me to blow the whistle. Anyone see anything different?
Oh,
Who was that? Jim?
yeah.
Okay.
Clean. Look clean.
Yeah, okay.
Near the net. Near the net.
What we're looking at here is watch how she pushes the ball out right there. Okay, watch a little closer. There's the block. Okay.
You can see it roll off her fingertips.
Right. That one's a little bit more in the gray area to me, is that I would not argue vigorously either way on whether you let that go or you called it, because there was a little more, like Jim said, there was a little more roll out of the hand where the ball sort of rolled off the fingers and out of the hand more. So there's an argument to be made there. Okay. And again, these are judgment calls. So I'm going to see it possibly a little different than you're going to see it. Also, where you're located on the court can often make a difference in what you see. A real good thing I say to coaches a lot is when they ask me about a call, if I'm the R2 and they're asking me about a call, I'm going to say, well, from his angle, that's probably what he saw, or that's the way he saw it from his angle, which gives you that from a different angle, you get a different perspective. Okay, so that's a good sort of tool to use with coaches to sort of give an explanation when you're trying to explain for your partner. Okay. And if you don't know, say, hey, coach, I'm not exactly sure what he saw, but next time I'll see if I can get you an answer. Okay. And get something. And then at the next time out or between sets, go and talk to your partner and say, hey, the coach was asking about this call. What can I tell him? Okay. Those are good techniques to helping deal with coaches when it comes to when they don't agree with a call by your R1 and you're the R2. So you're kind of the person they're going to come to first. Okay. Another thing is if it's a good plan. If there's something that you think needs to be discussed, you can send the captain. Hey, coach, have your captain go ask the R1. They can send the captain over, and the captain is allowed to ask for a ruling. If a captain comes to me and asks me on a hand call like that, why it was or wasn't called, I'll give a very quick explanation and then get on with the game. Okay. I don't try and push them away and say, no, don't even bother. I want to hear what they say real quick. I want to make it fast. The only thing I want to avoid is if it's a constant, if they have a technique of they want to come over and the captain wants to come over and talk to you about every play. Okay. That's a little different situation when now is a time when they're abusing that privilege of coming to talk to you about a call that is a judgment call. If it's a rules violation and a rules call, we kind of have a different scenario than that. If you're making a ruling that does not involve a judgment call. Okay. All right. Finish this off. I think that was it. Is that it? Let's see here. When I come back, I think we missed something here. I'm gonna let it run. Here we go. Next one. Boom, boom. Slow it down. Oh, yeah, that's the one we just talked about. So again, in this one, see, looking at that again, like I said, that's that gray area. I could argue both ways for that being called and not being called. So I don't believe the official in that situation blew his whistle. I believe he let play continue. So, all right, let me bring up the next set of videos. All right, this one, we're going to look at where are these calls correct or not correct? Okay, so he's calling the fault on, he's calling a double on the setter who just put that ball over. Okay, so be watching, that's what they're going to slow it down. Let's watch it again.
Yeah, there were 2 contacts on the ball.
Watch it here.
Oh.
Yep. All right. Again, that's another one. At full speed, it looks a lot worse than I think it really is. Because there are other factors. Remember when I said don't let what the player does before or after determine how you make that call. She's not in a great position. Her shoulders are not squared. She's kind of sideways, okay? So there are a lot of factors that are going to lead you to believe that that should be a double contact. Remember, this is the second contact too. So now the double is coming into play. Unlike the previous ones we saw where they were off the block and it was the first contact, now we're talking second contact. So when we're talking second contact, you may not have multiple contacts. And normally we're talking about the setter and the hands. That's what's coming into play 95% of the time here, is that you're looking at, did the setter contact the ball evenly with both hands? Or was it this hand first and then this hand, okay? So what did people think about that one?
I think it's a good call. Even though in slow-mo it looks like a better, or it looks cleaner in slow-mo, but we can't, we don't officiate in slow-mo. So
Right, we don't.
What's
I
the
think
call?
what's that?
What's the call?
I thought it
What's-
was a good call because, you know, you're not going to nickel dime them to death. And the thing is, this is a good example of why we don't use videos to make calls. It's an instant reaction call.
Right, but what I think
Let
the
me
only
give you the
thing
other
about,
side of it.
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jeff. Can I give the other side of it?
Yeah, go ahead, Roy.
What happens is you see all of the stuff leading up to her making contact. And consequently, you are ruling on that. You're only interested in is what happened at point of contact.
Exactly.
And if you focus strictly at point of contact, her hands are clean. The rest of it is ugly.
Yeah.
And that's my point. You have to be at the hands, focusing just at the point of contact. What happened? Was it clean? Yes. Let it go.
Exactly.
And we don't
I'm
know.
looking at the body language on her. If she was squared to face the other side of the net, that ball is clean. If she's throwing it over a shoulder, that ball is not clean.
I was basically going to, with Roy, the whole point, the big point about that is that, again, within the rules, this is something in the last 4 or 5 years they've really emphasized, is that they don't want you looking at, you know, technique of the setter. They want you looking at results, okay? So that's why what Roy is saying is look at the contact point, not all the other factors that were involved in that. Now, that's a tough call. Believe me, that was not an easy call. Also, there are some officials who feel that if it's an attack call, okay, where that ball was directed over the net, that there are some officials who feel that any ball that's attacked, it has to be super, super clean. They might have a different judgment for that attack ball than they will for a set, because I'm setting it to my own teammate, okay? But you should, if it's a setting action, whether it's a directed ball across the net or whether I'm setting it to my own player, you want to try and remain consistent with how you call it. If you let a little wobble go or a little, you know, not perfect contact go on the set, you're going to have to let a little not perfect. You're going to have to apply the same rule or the same factors for that attack ball. Any agreement or disagreement there? Okay. All right, let's move on to look at the next play. So here it is. I think it's coming up.
Can tell.
Yep. Somebody asked something?
I think he just said he couldn't tell.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought I heard my name called. All right. Let's move on. So he's calling that cross court set. Let's see, they might zoom in a little closer here. One more shot. I think we zoom in a little tighter. There it is. Here's the tight.
Okay.
You can see it come off her right hand a little bit, but he is calling a tight game. And he's being consistent.
He's calling a very old-fashioned game. We wouldn't call it that tight anymore.
How would you have called that, Marianne?
I would have let that go. It came off her hand fine. You might have possibly had a slight lift on the end there, but other than that, she was under it. It came off clean off her hand. I wouldn't have called that.
For the new guys, did you notice anything about the ball after it left her hand?
Yeah, it's fun.
It had spin.
Right. The ball had, it wasn't a super fast spin, but it definitely had a twist or a spin to it. A lot of coaches are going to get on you when they see that, and they're going to use that as their focal point for why that should have been a double contact. Well, that ball's spinning. Okay.
What
Yeah.
was it that rule got?
We're not letting spin determine, we're not letting what happens after determine what our call should be at point of contact.
Yeah, rotation does not justify a double.
Okay.
My point with this official is he's calling it tight, probably too tight, but he is consistent with it.
No, he keeps picking on the same team.
Yes.
Both those calls were on the same team.
Yeah, but that's not consistent. Let's see. What was that in football? We used to talk about that in football or in basketball. Actually, it was in basketball more. We would talk about, well, how come this team, one team's already in the bonus and has 8 fouls on them, and the other team has 1 foul on them? And that was always a point that coaches would get on us and say, how come we only got 1, or how come they only have 1 and we've got 8 fouls already on us? You're fouling more, coach. I mean, so, you call what's there and keep it consistent on both. So, all right. So I think we're in agreement that those are probably calls we would have let go on that second one, not blown and let play continue. I went back to run through this. I went backwards, so we got to run through this to get to the next play. See how you can see there a slight spin. That's not too bad. You've got some rotation of the ball.
Well, he should have called a catch and throw on the third one over. She catches it and throws it.
Oh, I guess that was the end of that's the last. I thought we had another one. Sorry, I thought we had another play after that, a different one. All right. Let's move on to the next ball handling one. Sorry, let me get this. Okay, remember, these are first contacts. Right. So we're looking at the play on the black team, not the blue team.
Yeah.
We're looking at the play by when that ball comes back over the net. How does she play? How she plays that ball coming out off that spike.
Fine.
I want to see the slow mo at the net right there or not.
No.
I think I remember talking about this during one of
Here's a good look at it.
Off the chest, off the hands.
Multiple contacts, it's legal. Unless
allowed
she
to happen
catches
on the
it
first one,
right
right?
there.
Looks like one of the ball.
All right, so a couple things to talk about here. Multiple contacts are allowed on that play. So as Marianne said, if that ball was to hit on the arm here, and then she caught it, went from the arm, and then she caught it with the hands, that's one attempt to play the ball, multiple contact, legal, okay? The question comes, if the ball was here and rolled all the way down her forearm, and then she kind of flipped it up, that could be considered prolonged contact, okay? Do you agree, Marianne?
Yep.
Yeah. So again, you know, we're not getting the best. The video too is not super. So let's watch it finish out here. Any comments? I think I would let that go. Larry, were you able to watch that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did see it, and I would not have called that because I didn't think that there was any really prolonged contact. There was one attempt to play the ball. The ball maybe, but it's a good play. Where did the ball stick? It did.
So I'll go with that. Now, guys, this, you know, ball handling is not, believe me, we understand ball handling is not easy. These are some tough plays. These are tough plays for veteran officials to call. So we understand that, you know, in your first and second year, there's going to be some inconsistencies in these calls with you. So again, keep in your head, you want to just keep it even on both sides or throughout the game. Try and keep your level of ball handling the same throughout the match.
Jeff, can you clarify first contact, hard driven ball? It can be as ugly as it can get with the exception of extended contact.
That is correct. And there used to be a long time ago, we used to use the term hard driven spike. If you played a hard driven spike, they allowed multiple, but now it doesn't matter. As long as it's first contact, it doesn't matter whether that ball is going 75 miles an hour or whether it's a lollipop that's going up over, you know, really slow and they have all the time in the world to play it. Makes no difference as long as it's first contact. Remember, first contact is not the block. Block is not considered first contact, okay? The first contact comes from the play after the ball has been blocked, okay, and has left the area of the net.
Jeff, can I ask you a quick question?
Yep.
This is Dave. Just as a first-year official, are you suggesting that on these that are more challenging that we more just defer that to our more experienced official and not call something rather than calling something and blowing it if it's more
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem with that, Dave, is that as the R1, the R2 cannot make that call. So there's specifically the R2 is not going to make ball handling calls.
Nope.
They can suggest those calls, but it's not something we want to get into a big habit of. We don't want the R2 calling the game from the bottom by giving the R1 constant signals. Okay, that's not how we want the game officiated. So if you're the R1 on a freshman game, you're not going to really be able to, if you have a down official. You won't always have a down official on a freshman game, but if it's a JV game and you're the R1, you're not going to be able to defer to the R2 in making that call. You're going to have to make that call on your own. So does that make sense?
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So it really becomes, the more you see, like we said, the more contacts you're going to get to see, the better you're going to become at this. The more plays you see, the better you're going to become at determining what it is and getting your eyes adjusted. That's another thing, is that another reason for watching the warm-ups carefully is so that you can become accustomed to the speed of the play. For example, when I do lines for Division I, especially Division I men, we get out there and we are watching those spikes, because that ball is moving so fast. You really have to, as on the corners, you have to be get accustomed to the speed at which that ball travels. Okay? So, and you're doing the same thing at whether it's freshman or whether it's varsity, you want to see what level of play and speed that those teams are playing at. All right. All right. I think we are. Let me double check if there's any more videos of it. I think this is. If there's not, we're going to take a little 10-minute break. But let me just double check my folder here. Yep. All right. So I think this is a good spot. Let's take a 10-minute break and come back. What about 18? An assignment, and I'm close by. You never know. You may get a call and say, "Hey, can you get over to Santa Barbara High School in 30 minutes?" Somebody that can't make their assignment, and you might pick up games because you're prepared and have a uniform in the car with you.
What's the old Boy Scout motto? Always be prepared.
Yep.
I know particularly this season, right? Because they're running boys and girls at the same time, right?
Correct. Yeah. We don't know. Like I said, everything's
nothing's
a for sure thing in 2020 here.
I should say that's the plan, at least.
So Jeff?
Yes, sir.
You might, you're talking about scorekeeping and how important that is and be able to read it. I think Mary Ann has the ultimate, and I want to say, situation that came up that delayed a match between two big-time teams 20 minutes because of the scoring was not done correctly. And Marion was the up official, so it was just a 3-ring circus, and was handled unbelievably well by Mary Ann. I was there, so
the goal is
it's a great story.
Yeah, let's maybe we'll get that at another time.
Yes.
But the goal is in those situations is for the R2 to handle it quickly on their own without the R1 having to come down off the stand. Doesn't always happen, but that's how we want it to happen, is that the R2 handles it by themselves, and then sort of lets the R1 know what happened, okay, or what the outcome is for the situation. Sometimes they're quick, sometimes they're not. Okay. All right, now we are going to move into probably everyone's favorite part of the game, and that is going to be alignment and rotations. All right, wait, before we get to that one, I got another one. Here we go. All right, we're gonna look at this one first, and then I have one that I made up with some specific situations. I don't know. We're not going to do a quiz today. There is actually in this, there's a quick little talk over quiz, but not like we normally do. So. Okay. So 6.4, okay. At the moment of serve, so when you hear, you're listening, when you hear contact of serve, okay, you must be in the correct serving order. Each right side player must have part of one foot touching the floor closer to the right sideline than both feet of the center player. You'll see now I'm going to interpose or use both center and middle. They mean the same thing. I'll sometimes say the middle front and middle back. Sometimes it'll be the center front, center back. They're the same position. That's just the way I set it up and the way I talk about it sometimes. Feet of the center in the core of the corresponding. So the right side player has to be closer to the right sideline than the center or middle player. Okay. Not including the server. The server is outside the court, so they're not involved in this if it's the serving team. Each left side player must have part of one foot touching the floor closer to the left sideline than both feet of the center player, okay, in the corresponding row. Each front row player must have part of one foot touching the floor closer to the center line or the middle or the net than both feet of the corresponding back row player. Okay. After the ball is contacted for serve, doesn't matter. They can move anywhere they want. Okay. So these are what we talk about. This is what we mean by adjacent players. You have your right front, your center front, your left front. For the right front, they have two adjacent players, center front and the right back. Those are the adjacent players. Is there a question there, or does somebody need to mute? We're getting some. So I'm going to mute a few people. Sure, please. Thank you. All right. All right. Okay, so this is an example of an illegal alignment. You can see the center front is closer to the right sideline than the right front. That is out of alignment. That is an illegal alignment, and that would be a violation. Okay. Your corner players, you can see who they can overlap with. Okay. The corners can overlap with either the centers or the player directly in front of them. Okay. This is the centers can overlap with three players. They can overlap with either one on the player on either side of them in their front row or back row respectively, or they can overlap with the player directly behind them, the center front and the center back. Okay. Here is another example of an illegal alignment where the center back feet are in front of the center front's feet. That's all we're looking at, by the way, is we are only looking at their feet. We are not looking at their body. If the center back's feet were behind the center front, but he's leaning forward, so his head or upper torso is in front of that center front, not a violation. Only the feet are what we're concerned about. Okay. If they're even and you cannot make one closer, if they're exactly even, legal. You're going to let play continue. Is that right? Wait a minute here. Even is illegal. Larry, do you agree with that? Roy, do you agree with that?
No.
I don't agree with what they say. I think that's a misprint. That's legal to me. Larry, yeah.
Jeff, you're correct. It is legal if they are standing next to each other. It's only illegal if one is in front of the other.
Thank you.
And then there's that whole gray area of how much are you going to allow that to happen, but that's a different issue.
Yeah.
In the pure sense of the word, parallel is fine, behind is fine.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I did not make up this PowerPoint. This was provided by CIF. So I think that's supposed to be legal, not illegal, is what that's supposed to say.
Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Jeff, I'm sorry. What happens is because, and to say whether it's CIF or whatever, when, the interpretation of that it has been in the past, that would have been not acceptable, would have been illegal. But in today's world, and I know I've talked to a lot of officials and, over, at different levels, and they're not going to call that ever, because it's even, it's not, you're not really,
getting an advantage.
it's not an advantage.
And, in the basketball world, advantage, disadvantage is a big term we use when you officiate basketball, is you look for, was there an advantage gained? It's not used so much in the volleyball world because we're not having contact, we're not having that type of play like they do in basketball, but this could be one situation where you could apply it, that there is no advantage gained here. Okay? All right, so here's your quiz. The player in the right back position must be behind which player? Okay. Left back, center back, right front, or center front? Someone, one of the new guys, give me an answer.
Right front.
Right front.
That is correct. They have to be positioned behind the right front. Okay, because that's the player in front of them. Right back, right front can overlap. Right back and left back cannot overlap. Okay, they're that. Okay, so front row players must be closer to the net than their corresponding back row players. That would be a true when you say when what they mean by corresponding is center, right, and left, in terms of closer front, okay? So it's not just because a back row player was closer to the net, and we'll get into this in a minute, just because a back row player is closer to the net than some front row players does not mean that they are out of alignment, okay? It does not mean that it's an illegal alignment. And we're gonna go into that a lot, actually, in a little bit in this presentation. All right, start small, okay. There's lots to learn. This is a difficult part of the game, okay? This is something you're gonna wanna go over with your R1 prior to the game. As the R2, you're gonna be watching the receiving team. When you're the R2, you're gonna be watching the receiving team for their alignment. It is the R1's responsibility to watch the serving team. If I'm the R1 and I'm working with a new official, I will always check what's going on the receiving team to check their alignment as well as my responsibility, which is the serving team. But I will have a conversation with that official prior to the match in my pregame, asking them, how do they feel about their alignment? Do they understand it? Are they comfortable with making that call? If they're not, I'll ask them, do you want me to help you with that call? And I could help in a couple of different ways. I can outright blow my whistle, which is I'm not super in favor of. I can offer some signals possibly to help you be aware that we have a problem. And sometimes I'll just communicate by, if all of a sudden you see I'm not going at the same pace, I'm not blowing the whistle for serve at the same rate that I was earlier, that could mean I'm trying to send you a message that, hey, there's something wrong on your side of the net. Okay, so those are some ways that I, as the R1, might communicate or let you know that, hey, we got a problem over here before the ball's even served. Okay. Second and third year, that's when you start to pick this up. Some keys to this, and this works for first year twos, is the number one, you want to be able to identify the setter. That's a very, very important concept. You want to know who the setter is and where they are lined up, whether they're front row or back row, whether they're right side, middle, or left side. That will help you a ton, okay? You want to put their name, you want to know the setter's number, okay? You want to put that in your brain. And so you want to, as the R1, I'm always looking for where that setter is. Where are they located on the court? Helps me in a lot of ways, and we'll talk more about that as we go through this, okay? But that's super important. Okay, so in looking at alignments, the object is not to catch someone doing something wrong. If you cannot see an overlap without moving, meaning if you have to move down towards the end line to see whether that player is overlapping, probably we're gonna let it go. If it's not, if you got to get that close where you need a direct 90-degree angle sort of look at it to tell whether that player is in front of the other player, that's calling it a little tight. So you're probably going to let it go. You want to be calling this from your position near the pole on your side, okay, on the receiver side, okay. This is, I am a huge fan of this, preventative officiating. If you see that there are possible problems, if you see the setter is leaving early, okay, try and give the coach a little warning, give him a heads up. Hey coach, watch your setter, or watch number 23, or, you know, or 27 and 21 are getting really close. You know, give them a little bit of heads up so that they can take care of it so you don't have to, okay? And remember, it's at the moment of serve, and it's where their foot is. So if at the moment of serve, the setter has their foot in the air but hasn't contacted the ground in front of that player, in front of the player that's in front of them that would put them out, they're good to go. It's at the moment of contact, where are their feet, okay? Rare for the R1 to call a serving. Most overlaps tend to come on the receiving team because that setter has to get to their setting position a lot faster, because the serving team has all that time to set up their defense. They're going to move into defensive mode right away, whereas the receiving team is moving into offensive mode right away. So they want to get that setter to their spot quickly. Okay. All right. Why is knowing the setter front row back? Because this all has to come, not only is it with alignment, but also knowing the center front or back has a big impact on legal attacks, meaning back row attacks on the ball. When the setter is coming from the back row, you have a much greater possibility that you're going to have a back row violation than you are if their setter is coming from the front. Okay. Robert, here's something a coach can talk to us about. Can you talk a little about the difference between a 6-2 and a 5-1 in terms of how they run an offense?
So a 6-2 is where you'll have 6 players on the court that could attack the ball from any point, and then 2 of those are going to be a setter. And typically and as far as the lineup goes, or on the court, they'll be deemed as a right side, and their home position is right back. But sometimes
where's that setter coming from normally when you're on a 6-2?
My bad. I was starting from score 1. The setter will always be in the back row during a 6-2. And during a 5-1, the setter will rotate all the way around. And when they're in the front row, they'll really only have 2 options to set in the front row. So they'll usually be their outside or their middle hitter. So if you just saw that setter go up to block a ball and then turn around and set a ball to someone else on the right side while there's the other 2 front row players are right there, you probably have a back row attack. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, what we're saying is that this is also something you learn from watching the warm-ups, is if they're going to run a 1-setter offense or a 2-setter offense. When they're running a 2-setter offense, you're 99% of the time, if they're the setter that's coming in is coming in from the back row, unless it's something where that setter was to take the first ball over the net, then they can't obviously set it. So then you might have a little different situation. But normally in a 6-2, the setter's coming from the back row, so you know he's a back row player. In a 5-1, that setter is setting in every position all the way around. So you need to know whether they're front row at the time or whether they're back row at the time. Because when they're back row, like I said, they can't block and they can't attack the ball if it's above the height of the net. When they're front row, however, they can. So That's a situation where number 4, who's the setter, can't do it in the back row, but they move into the front row. And a lot of times they'll try on that very first pass when they move in, they're trying to catch the other team off guard, thinking that number 4 is still back row, and they'll turn and attack the ball on the second hit or dump that ball over, trying to catch that other team off guard when they move into the front row. And that's legal. Okay, so that's why it's important to know what type of offense they're running and where that setter is located. Okay, so back row setters in front of the zone jumps and sets the ball that is higher than the top of the net. You could have a lot of things that can happen here. If it's a bad set or just not precise enough and that ball happens to float across the net or into the plane where it is either blocked or played by the other side, now you have a back row attack, even though you're not thinking of it as attack. It wasn't his intention, wasn't the setter's intention to attack the ball, but they were trying to make a set to a player who was close to the net, and it happens to break the plane of the net or go over. Now you have an attack. Okay. And all right.
Jeff?
Yes.
On that, one of the things that you have to be sure of, because especially in a varsity match, you can get setters who are jumping, behind the attack line and on jump set, and ball ends up going over, but that's a legal play because they are still behind the attack line when they made the play.
Correct.
So,
but I'm not going to get into it. I understand. We're going to go over next time when we meet.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jeff. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that's fine. And we're going to go over that. Marianne, that's a heads up for you that when we get into the general meeting next time, I think I'm going to have you go over back row attacks with this group. So, but we'll talk about back row. We'll talk about the back row block and back row attack in a lot more depth on another night. Okay. But it's hard to avoid it in this situation because they all kind of tie together. Okay. Other team legally causes ball. Let's see, back row block. Okay, so again, if the setter is coming from the back row and they turn or they're jumping possibly and they get a ball put into their hands, we have a block situation, which we'll go over again, like I said, at another time. So that's another reason to know whether your setter is front row or back row. Okay, and we'll talk about all the definitions. Marianne, we'll talk about the definitions of what constitutes a back row block and what does not. Okay. Okay.
But that makes a big deal with that front row setter, because that's the difference between a back row attack and a front, like a 5-1 setter in the front row who can reach over and contact, correct?
Correct, it is. And with most high-level teams, almost all college teams I've seen, they usually always use one setter because they like to keep it consistent. That's the other thing, is that one setter basically is your setter. Obviously is like your quarterback. So you don't see them in the pros that the quarterbacks are switching every 4 downs. That same stays in the entire game, and so the same thing sort of applies with setters. Is that coaches like to keep it consistent, and with that, keeping that same setter in. At the lower levels, you'll much more often see 2 different setters. Okay. All right. So pregame, again, this is important things to talk about with your partner is the alignments. R2, we do not use a lineup card. Okay. So this, again, that's everywhere else except California. They have lineup cards where the R2 carries a lineup card so they can sort of see the alignment. We do not. Makes it a little harder for us, but that's what we want in California. Okay, when it says who is opposite the setter, this is important for alignment. You want to know the setter's number and what player is opposite them. So if they're starting in the right back, the setter starting in the right back, the left front person is going to be their opposite. And you want to be tracking them. You want to be watching as the setter rotates. That makes sure that their opposite is still that same number. It'll be that same number throughout the set unless they're subbed out. Okay, and we'll talk more about that too. This is getting a little farther along. You're probably who leads the setter, meaning who's in front of the setter and who follows the setter. So again, at this point of your career, we are not expecting you, and I would not suggest that you try and figure that out. Just work on the first thing in your first match, work on IDing the setter. Your second match, maybe work on IDing the setter and who is their opposite. okay, in your second or your third match. So don't worry about who leads the setter and who follows the setter, okay? Ask people what they use, what their tricks are for memorizing or keeping those numbers in their head of who the setter is and who their opposite is. I always try and do a little, I always try and kind of relate it to a math game or something, is that I'll look at my setter's number and go, okay, my setter's number 4, his opposite is number 16. And I'll go, okay, so 4 times 4, I just try and, 4 times 4 is 16. So I try and do something like that. Or 3 and 12, well, 12 can be divided by 3, something, that's me. Everybody else has different ideas or different little tricks that they use to keep those in their head. All right. Okay. So is this lineup legal or not? Okay. So here's your right front. Here's your center front. Here's your left front. Okay. We're just going to kind of go over this a little. So your right front is to the right side of the center front. That's good. Your center front is between your right front and your left front. So that's good. Your left front is closer to the left side than the center front. So in terms of front row,
It's okay.
they're good.
That's okay.
Okay? In terms of the back
okay.
row,
They're not.
we have our left back, then our center back, and then our right back. Those are okay. Okay, they're all in proper order. Okay, here's my center back. Okay, right here. Let's take a look. Is the center back closer to the center line than the center front? Okay. And I would say yes in this situation. So you would have an overlap here or an illegal lineup, because the center back is closer to the front line than the center front is. That's your overlap. The left front, closer to the center line than the left back, so that's legal. The right front is closer to the net or the center line than the right back. That is legal. This is your problem right here. Center back is too far forward in front of the center front, or the center front is not forward enough, whichever way you want to look at it. Try not to, when you explain a rotation error to a coach, try not to coach them and say, well, your center front was supposed to be here, because we don't know who made that mistake. We don't know if the center front here is to fault or if the center back here is at fault. Okay, we just know that they're out of alignment. So that's what we're saying. Hey, coach, center back and center front, we're trying to use numbers. Numbers 3 and number 12 are out of alignment. They're overlapping is the best term to use. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, all right, is this one legal? Okay, let's look here. We got right front, right back, they're good. Center front looks closer to center back, they're good. And center back is your setter, by the way. That's what the asterisk is. All right, left back and left front, they look good to me. And all these triangles, they're fine. So that's going to be a legal rotation or lineup. Okay. All right, they talk about this isn't something that I do, but they talk about seeing triangles. So you look at your 3 fronts, and are they forming this type of a triangle? You look at your 3 backs, are they forming a triangle where you have the center in between your right and your left? So those are, that's the way, again, that's not necessarily how I look at opposites. I'll want to know, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to ID who my setter is. Let's say my setter here is my right front. Their opposite is the left back. So what I'm doing is I'm looking here and going, are these 2 opposite? Okay. If the left back was over here and I had another on the other side of the center back, they would not be opposite. They would be out. So then that would be a key to me. But that's, again, my system and something you're going to develop as you go through. This is often something that doesn't really start to click until your 3rd year. Okay. Legal or illegal here. This is, a lot of times I'll refer to this as a stack, where you have all the players stacked over to one side. Okay. So you have your right back, center back, looks good to me. Left back looks good to me. That way, all the back row looks fine. They're not overlapping each other. Now your right back looks like your right front is slightly in front of your right, or slightly closer to the front line rather, than your right back. So that looks good to me. Same thing looks like my center here. Their foot is closer to the front line than the back than the center back, and definitely the left is closer. Now a lot of people are going to look at this when you get on the court. It looks funny because you have a back row player who is in front of two, who is closer to the front than two front row players. That does not mean they're out of alignment. Okay. Remember, this player, this right back player, can only overlap with either this this player or this player. These are the only two players that this right front can overlap or you need to be concerned with. Don't worry about this right front and these two players. They have nothing to do with each other. Okay. There's the legal. They drew the line for you there. Okay. All right. Your setter, obviously. This is the serve receive. This is oftentimes one of the first lineups you'll see, because a lot of times your setter will start in the right back. Okay, so this might be their first rotation. So you have your setter in the right back, and they want to draw him close or her close to the net, so that at the contact of serve, this setter is going to move. If you watch my arrow, is going to move to the center here to get ready to receive the pass. So they want them up close. Right front, this person is probably not a good passer, so they don't want them passing, so they're hiding them or pulling them up. Okay. These guys are all legal, so they have four servers, they have four passers in this alignment. Okay. This is what we call, they'll call this a setter stack sometimes. It's probably more of a coaching term than it is an officiating term, but it's when your setter is center back, you're bringing them up to the net, so they got to be behind the center front. Neither of these two players are going to pass the ball, okay? The key here's the key in this alignment, and you're going to see this a lot, is that this center back, this setter, has to be between these two players, okay? Sometimes what will happen is this right back will move over here, and this left back will move farther over, and now the setter back is no longer between these two players, okay? And it makes it a little hard to see because they're not close to each other. The center back and the front is up by the net, and these two are back, near closer to the end line. So it can be a difficult play to see a lot, but it happens often. I would say it's one of the top, actually, rotation errors that there is. Marianne, would you agree with that? Marianne there? Yes. Was that yes? Yeah. So honestly, yeah, this is really one of the biggest areas that they make, because they get sloppy. It's the setter's job to be watching where to make sure that they're lining up between their two other back row players. So.
Right, and this is called row 2, so you would let the coach know in row 2 your setter needs to be behind the girl in the front.
So I'll usually just say, hey, she's not splitting your back row. That's usually my term that I use. I go, coach, the setter is not splitting the two players in the back, meaning they're on the wrong side, or one of the players on the wrong side of the setter. Okay.
Jeff?
Yes, sir.
The last rotation that you showed,
yep.
At least in my experience, has been that's the number one place where they're out of rotation.
Right, and that's just
they're trying to move their play. They're trying to move the players. Yeah, they're trying to move their players around to get better serve receive that way. I actually had to make that call in a CIF playoff game up at Villanova. As the R2.
And a lot of times they'll train this setter to be right next to or right behind this center front. And if this center front happens to line up over here, the setter just goes with them and isn't even watching that they're no longer between the two players they need to be back here.
Yeah.
So, and this is one of those calls that if I'm the R1 and I'm looking, sometimes I'll even have as the R1, you'll have a better look because you're higher up. You'll have a better look at this than the R2 does, simply because of your vantage point. And this is kind of one of those where I might give you a hard look or a prolonged look to let you know, hey, take a look, something's not right, okay? And a lot of times we'll talk about that stuff at a timeout. If there's out of alignments going on that I think you're not catching, a lot of times at a timeout, I'll call you over and we'll discuss it, and I'll try and let you know what the situation is. Tons of times at the end after a match, I'll sit down with an official and we'll actually put it down on pen and paper and say, hey, look, this is what was going on. You got to kind of be aware of this. All right. So another one that looks really weird. A lot of people look at this receive alignment and think there's no way that this is legal, but this is a legal alignment. Your setter is your left back. They pull them way up here because this is basically where they want the setter to be to receive that pass. Okay, so they pull them up. You have 4 passers. The key here is when the setter is the left back, this left front has to be closer. So they have to draw this left front in. Sometimes this left front will be sloppy and end up, if you can see my cursor, and end up more by the 10-foot line. And now you have an out of rotation because the left back, the setter, is closer to the net than the left front is. But this is a hard rotation to see. Like I said, it looks wrong. It looks like it should be an out of alignment, but it is not. Okay, we're almost done here, guys. Okay, let's look at this one. This is basically just what I was talking about. Is this alignment legal or not? Okay, here's your setter, the left back. Looks good to me. There, left side of the center. No worries about the right. Right here, the left front is closer, legal. Just what I was talking about. Basically the same thing that we were just talking about.
No, your center back is closer to the front.
Thank you. So there we go. Illegal. I didn't catch it. So there. So I was just keying on this player. I wasn't keying here. So yeah. Everybody see that now, how the center back is closer than the center front. So again, we don't know who made this problem. The center back needs to step back 2 feet or the center front needs to come up 2 feet. Okay. Another one, we have a triangle, legal or illegal. Let's look. On this triangle, looks good. Right back, center back, left back. So the back row, they're not crossing over each other. Front row, right front is closer to the right sideline, center is in the middle, left front is closer to the left sideline. That looks good. Center back and center front, or let's start here. Right back and right front is closer, they're good. Center back, center front is closer, they're good. Left back and left front is closer, they're good. I'm calling it legal. Okay, why isn't it? Is that my last one? Might be my last slide. Yep. Okay, so that's the last
legal.
one. Yeah, it's legal. I'm surprised they didn't do it like they did before. All right, we'll stop share. All right, that's a lot of information, huh, guys? A lot to digest. I hope that helped a lot of you in a lot of ways in terms of alignment. I know it's a tough call. Again, we're not expecting you to get this right out of the chute. If you can start to pick these up in your second year, you're doing well. Okay. Okay, a couple reminders. We have 10 more days, I believe, on the study guide, the end of the month. Not even 10 days. It's, right, Robert? Study guide closes on the 30th?
Yeah, a week from tonight. From tonight.
So finish up your study guides. You know, again, if you have a couple of chances. If you don't get your 80%, you can retake it, and it will tell you your missed problems. So you can just look at those and retake them again. Okay. The classification exam will open in October, on October 1st. I would suggest waiting a little bit before you take it. Don't take it right away. You also have multiple opportunities to take your classification exam. Okay, so if you don't pass it on the first one, again, don't worry about it. You'll have other opportunities. So if you wanted to take it and see how you did, you can take it again. So if you wanted to use it as a trial run to see, take it and, oh, I only got 74%, you can look at it and know where some of the issues are. There are different, I will warn you that there are different, there are 2 different exams for the class. Everyone, when you take it multiple times, the questions could be mixed up, or they could be a couple of slightly different questions on the exam. So for the classification portion. Okay. We do have a full meeting next month or next week, and then I believe it's a week off, and then starting next week, it'll start every other week till the end of October. And we have a makeup meeting in November.
And since a lot of you still haven't done your study guide, if an overwhelming majority of you haven't, I can set up a Zoom meeting sometime either this weekend or early next week before the meeting. So we can go over it, go through some of the questions that you're having trouble with. Get with me on that if you would like to help. If not, don't worry about it.
It is an open book test, so you could just look through your book. There is no time on it. They usually will tell you what rule they're referring. Just go in and read it and go back and answer the question.
We're not trying to trick you. We want you to know this stuff. Basically the idea is we want you to it's forcing you to get into the book. That's what they're trying to do, is force you to open the book and look at the rules. So
just watch the wording, because they do put in a lot of don'ts or not when it's to throw you off and make the answer incorrect.
So.
All right. Are there any other questions heading out of here?
Are you referencing the study guide? Sorry, on that last conversation, were you referencing the study guide?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody else? If not, goodbye, farewell, have a good night.
No, I wanted to tell Larry about the, in the case book, on the comment you had about the hash line, the sideline extension,